And he's also regarded as the god of breath. So the inner wind, which I'm using to speak, there'd be no language without breath. I mean, air is really sacred if you think about it. And it keeps us alive with oxygen. And he then was called the Lord of the Word, or the Lord of Commands, because he would bring the messages from the divine council of the gods. Think of like the United Nations of all the gods having a meeting up in the heaven worlds. Well, they'd send Enlil down to tell it to humanity, the decision of the gods. No, it's been decided Russia's got to withdraw from Ukraine. Unconditionally, unilaterally, just pull out. End of. So Lord Wind, Enlil, would have to say that back to humanity. So that became very important, and no wonder the Sumerian farmers and scribes respected him, because how else can we know what the will of the gods is unless there's a communication system? I suppose this is where the AI comes in. It's like the AI is really also an extension of Enlil's work as a divine communicator. How can we know the will of the gods unless we can hear their word? And their word is embodied in Enlil. Much later, fast forward 3,000 years, Christ was called the Word of God. He's known as that in the Islamic tradition as well, the Word of God. Well, in a sense, that's drawing on the Enlil archetype, who is the divine word manifest. He was married to the goddess of grains, Ninlil, and we found tablets and old texts that tell his story. Now, in the flood, because the Sumerian story of Noah's flood is his main story, Enlil rewards Yushusthra, who's the Sumerian hero of the flood. He gives him immortality for having survived the flood, who, in a sense, is like the God of the Bible that gave Noah the rainbow of peace as a promise. So Enlil, after doing all the flood and all that, he then saves mankind. So it's a paradox. Enlil was the cause of the flood himself, because mankind made so much noise it prevented him from sleeping. Gods like their sleep. But then he was instructed to send the flood on behalf of all the council of the gods, because all the gods were annoyed with mankind. Mankind was a disappointment. Mankind was acting immorally, doing Ukraine wars, invading other countries, doing COVID, gain of function research. I mean, what's the list now if you were going to put before the Council of the Gods complaints against humanity? I've got a list. The Holocaust, for a start, anti-Semitism. But I'd also put there the non-recognition of Palestine and the Nakba and the mistreatment of Palestinians. I'd put the, I've got a long list of complaints. And I think Enlil had something similar in his day. Humans have been naughty for a long time. So he was told by the Council of Gods to send the flood. But he gave secret instructions to this one Noah-like figure, Yushusthra, how to build an ark and to save mankind. And that enabled, in this Sumerian text, mankind to survive. So we're only here because Enlil sent the command on how to build the ark and save us. And that's what we call the Noahide covenant. When God, we'll call him Enlil, decided to save mankind, he blessed Noah, and whose name means peace in Hebrew. Now I'd like to reactivate that covenant of peace. My learned colleague and mentor, a man called John Selden, who was a great scholar in 16th century, 17th century England. He was called the Rabbi of England. He knew perfect Hebrew, he knew the Talmud, he knew the Kabbalah, and he was a Christian who knew everything. He was also a legal scholar. He lived in Inns of Court in the Temple district of London, where I used to study and work. And John Selden said that the only way to save the planet is go back to Noah, because the Muslims, the Jews and the Christians will never agree about what is truth, because they've all got different stories. The Muslims got it via Muhammad, the Christians got it from Christ, and the Jews have got it from Moses. And they're all slightly different. They all kind of say the same thing, but human nature being what it is, they always emphasise the differences. And so there'll be perpetual war. So John Selden said, look, to stop the complaints, let's go back to Noah and say we all agree with the Noah covenant, the Noahide covenant. And he wrote and published this, and he was an advisor to both royalists and also to parliamentarians. He didn't agree with the Civil War in England. And one of his great friends, Edward Herbert, who was the Lord of Powys, where I used to live in Wales, he went to live in London, even though he was a royalist and was defending Montgomery Castle. He agreed to surrender it to Parliament if he could keep his library and go to live in London, which he did, so he could talk to John Selden, who was like a parliamentarian. So, these were very wise people, in my opinion. And they realised that if we're going to make peace on earth, we have to somehow get back to the Noah thing. And that is through Enlil's communication abilities. So, okay, what does this mean? Okay, in a nutshell, I would interpret this as the planet is basically screwed because we're all under a spell. We're all chasing something that's not really ours. I mean, poor old Putin thinks he owns Ukraine. I mean, he's got a spell on him. He went there for his honeymoon with his wife. He loves Ukraine. And if I love something, I want it. I want to control it. I want to own it. That's what he thinks love is. He's under a spell of ignorance. Therefore, I'm going to send in my troops and capture it and conquer it. It's mine. It's mine. I own Ukraine. I mean, that's madness. That's a spell that's been put on him. Dear me. And all the soldiers that are going along with it and fighting, yeah, Ukraine's ours, these guys haven't read history. They don't realise that Ukraine actually broke away and became an independent state in 1991. It's actually an independent state in law, in international law. And there is such a thing as international law. Well, they don't think that matters. No, because I love it so much. So the mad spell that he's under is causing mayhem and chaos in the world. Okay, so what do we do? And that's not the only mad spell that's going on. I mean, there's the Chinese are, oh dear, I love the Chinese, and I don't want to say anything against the good Chinese. I love Taoism and Confucianism and even parts of Chinese Marxism, very profound philosophers, very wise people over the many millennia of Chinese civilization. But Mao, I think I could have lived without. What Mao did to humanity, and was pretty ruthless and pretty cruel. And seems to me that there's a spell. Mao was the sort of Maoists of Chinese civilization who used violence and subterfuge and sneakiness to extend their power. That's another sort of spell they're doing, and it's another form of craziness, which they justify on hating the West, because the West's evil and the West is capitalist. But I'm sorry, those are dated concepts in my worldview. Capitalism is simply a fact of human history. It was invented with coinage back in 700 BC by the ancient Greeks and Lydians, and it's just a fact of history. We can't change that. What we can do is humanize it, use our HI to make the money system work for everyone, so that nobody's poor, so that we've all got enough. And surely that's not beyond our capacity now to transform the world's global economic system so that debt nations are free of that. Just as we abolished slavery, we now have to abolish poverty, in my opinion. But we're not going to do it in the Maoist way of violent revolution and attacking the capitalists. That, I think, is going to lead to trouble. And will lead to catastrophe. So that's another spell that needs unravelling. The hatred of capitalism, which has resulted in very extreme behaviour by Stalinist types. in history, and then there are other spells. But so that's what I'm, and again, of course, these communist types, they think they're doing it out of love. My mother was a Marxist. She said, no, communism is brilliant. It's lovey-dovey. We all going to live happily ever after and equally. Oh, but I don't want to read about Stalin or Solzhenitsyn. You know, she was not literally able to understand the downside of this. Like, enforced equality leads to terror, Cambodia style. And, you know, so there's a spell. She was under a spell. Picked up in World War II when Stalin was the great hero of Europe. And a lot of people who were very intelligent became, you know, under the spell of the communist ideas. But when I studied this, years later, I broke that spell. I realised, no, that's not going to work. You know, there's got to be a middle way between authentic social democracy is one thing. I love it. Authentic socialism and authentic liberal democracy, they're needed. We need human rights and social democracy together. That's what true European culture is about, in my opinion. So there's another spell we have to break, you know, the love of, actually it's about the love of hatred and jealousy and so on. Because it makes you feel good because I'm pure and I'm in the party, or whatever it is, whatever the party is. Might be a Nazi party or a communist party. How do we break the spell? We have to somehow listen again to Enlil's winds and the secret messages from the Council of Gods. And maybe AI can help us to activate the DI within the HI. So within the human being, the HI, within our human intelligence, we do have the faculty, I believe, to listen in to the DI, or the divine intelligence, which means picking up the messages from Enlil. We can do that through dreams, we can do it through synchronicities, we can do it through the good old-fashioned method of study, which I advocate. We can do it through learning. You can read about the gods. You can study the Bible and all the Bibles of all the religions. You can study the periodic table and all the philosophical traditions. You can read Plato, you can read Aristotle. These are all very wise people who've been picking up Enlil's divine word for the last 3,000 years. You can read about the teachings of Jesus, who was a great sage who picked all this stuff up. You can read about Muhammad, who again was able to download from Enlil, the divine Allah, incredible teachings for humanity. And I just want to announce, by the way, I've just been made a research fellow of a university in Iran devoted to the study of religions and all the denominations of the planet. Obviously they've picked up on the work I'm doing here in France, and they've appointed me as a research fellow, which is a great honour. I'm pleased to, as an academic, to associate with that university as a research fellow. It's very exciting. And the fact that it's in Iran is brilliant, because that is part of the cradle of humanity, those ancient lands of the Middle East, where Enlil was, you know, first revered in Iraq and Iran, their neighbouring countries. And it was the cradle of humanity there. So I hope I'm going to be writing, you know, and teaching. If I even get to visit there, that'd be nice. The university is in the ancient city of Qom, which is the holiest city of Iran. And of course, way back, there was the land of Zoroaster. So we've been at this game for a long time, humanity, listening to all these divine sages and their teachings, and very human sages, trying to discern the word of God, if you want. I would advocate studying them all. I mean, you know, and if you, yeah, that's where AI can help, because we can fasten the download. That's why I recorded a commentary on the entire Quran, which is now available to listen to. These things take time, you know, these ancient sages like Muhammad or Buddha or Jesus or Zoroaster, they were profound, deep people. And for us to tune into them, you know, we need to give it a shot. I mean, it's worth doing a degree, in my opinion. I'm only able to summarise a few things in my weekly philosophy club and so on, but you'll find much more in the books I've written, where I spend a lot of time going into detail. And yeah, the chapter on Enlil is cool, really. I always loved. I'm a great lover of cuneiform writing, and which is what the Sumerians used to write with. There's a wonderful verse, by the way, in the Quran, which I think, you might say, well, Thomas is teaching heresy, he seems to worship pagan gods. No, I worship all the gods of the allness within the allness, right? And the Quran says, call upon Allah or call upon Rahman by whatever name ye call upon him. It is well. For to him belong the most beautiful names. That's one of my favourite verses in the Quran. It's from Surah 17, verse 110. I mean, Muhammad was an amazing, inspired sage, because if he was sitting here, marking my work, he would say, yes, Thomas, you're right. Doesn't matter, call it Enlil, call it Diarmid, and find what these God archetypes mean psychologically. What I'm trying to do with the Tower of the Gods is say the Diarmid story or the Enlil story and all the others. What's its psychological meaning for us as human beings now? I'm a Jungian, so I'm looking for the transpersonal meaning that we can then work with as humans and become better humans. Now, I think that's what Muhammad was trying to do. He didn't have the learning. He wasn't a scholar, bless him. He was an inspired poet, and prophet, which is immensely, courageous of him. And he did it out of love, I believe. He was inspired by Khadija, his first wife, who was also a deeply spiritual woman. And they had what I call a wisdom affair. So study the Quran, study all the sacred scriptures, study the Gospels, read the Tower of the Gods, and maybe together we can stop the spell, stop the madness, get mankind back on the peace track. That's what the UN leaders were all trying to do in New York. And I hope, as a mere philosopher, I can give some guidance to people that would like to get on board with that project. So, I think, any questions, any further elaboration?
No, only a comment. It's just an amazing course.
It's quite good today, isn't it?
Yes.
And quite appropriate. I don't think we'll do another. I think that's enough for today.
You really dig deep.
We went deep into that one. And I hope that, my friends find that useful. And I just love all these gods. They're amazing. There's always something new they throw up. And I think that this is the birthright of all humanity, is to learn this stuff. I'd be happy if somebody wants me to devise a philosophy and religious studies curriculum for a country. If anyone wants to contact me at Minister of Education. I mean, I've taught in the UK system, which I know very well. And we do actually have quite a good religious education system in schools and in philosophy as well. I'm very concerned that it's being trashed, at the moment. It was actually, you were talking about Winston Churchill earlier before we went live. It was Churchill that brought in a law that every school in the country should teach religious studies and philosophy, and that every child should have that ability to learn that. I think he did it because he realised after the horrors of World War II and all that victory is a moral achievement as well as a physical thing. It's not just fighting the enemy. It's about fighting yourself. It's finding wisdom within yourself. And that's the purpose of philosophy. So Churchill realised, being a clever man, that the safeguard for British security long term is to increase our knowledge and wisdom as a people. So every school, every kid, whether you're on a poor council estate or at Eton, you should all have the ability to learn the stuff I'm teaching, right? And I just would like to do that in a more intense way. That's why I devised the periodic table. I'd like this to be on every classroom, in every school in Britain, and also throughout Europe and the world. And that would really increase the HI of people, you know. Let the geeks do the AI, they're fine. I'm about increasing the HI. And then it also increases the DI, because we realise, you know, we think, when we learn this stuff, we realise how amazing it is. You know, and this, yeah, it's our birthright to know this stuff. Okay, so look, blessings, and happy equinox to everyone. May the spirit of equilibrium and judicious self-reflection hold forth at this sacred time of year as we shift from summer to the onset of autumn and winter. Thank you.